But today we're going to talk about actual facial features, like kind of align them with geometric shapes that they can kind of help us guide, like looking for shadows on a face, and like some common misconceptions and problems with a face, okay? And I want you to kind of follow along and take some notes in your sketch that you have some of these to reference again later as we start to draw, okay? So it gives you something to do instead of just sitting here listening to me blather, all right? So the first thing I'm going to do, I'm going to put two little faces up here at the top. One will add features to, and he will be the good face, and the other one will be a man. So I'm going to just put two ovals at the top of my paper right now to just sort of stand in for two faces, okay? The oval can be all kinds of different shapes, right? Some people have faces that are more round. Some people, the jawline that's more square. Some people have faces that are longer, you know, so there's no like right or wrong shape oval to draw. Faces come in all different shapes. So whatever sort of oval there is fine. The first conception that we can talk about in terms of drawing a face has to do with the relationship between the size of your face and the size of your neck, okay? The common thing people want to do is they want to do like this. They want to do a skinny little neck at the bottom of like the chin, okay? Your head, your skull with the brain and your hair and skin and everything weighs between 8 and 12 pounds, okay? If we had just a skinny little neck that was only as wide as our chin, we wouldn't be able to hold our head up, right? Our heads would all flop our shoulder like this. We wouldn't be able to lift that huge weight of our actual like skull, the physical skull. So if you think about how wide my neck is, or you can even put your hands on the side of your own neck, you can feel that your neck attaches on this outer side of your head. It attaches right here behind your ears and the corner of your jaw. So that means if I'm making a neck on my face, that neck needs to be out here on this outer edge of my face, because that's how wide your neck is. Your neck is as wide as your skull. In order to be able to like successfully hold that up, okay? You can kind of hint a little bit at shoulders if you want. Well, we won't talk today. That's another kind of misconception. Now, if we think about eyes, right? We look at each other's eyes. When we look at faces, we look at eyes. So eyes become the most important feature on a face. But big misconception when we go to draw eyes is that because eyes are more important, they feel like they're at the top, like they're up here, way at the top of a face. Your eyes are actually not way up at the top of your skull, okay? Your eyes are halfway down your skull. I should go get my skull and show you that. I have a bin of them. I have to grab one. But if you think about your face from the bottom, the top part has hair. The bottom part of your face will be.
Okay, I'll do the column zero one. If you want to, you can plan out and draw your look and then like down here to the top and then or just do it right. So in this dish here, right now, there's my answer.
All right, so if we look at this eye, right, you can see that the eyes sit about halfway between the top of the skull and the bottom. Okay, the same is true with our faces. This top section is about the same as the bottom section of our face. So what that means to us when we're drawing proportionally, so let's see if I can get this guy in here. So if we think of in terms of like distance from the chin to the top of the skull, you can see right away that that eye socket section is about half. So this, if I do this and kind of freeze my fingers and then move it down here, it's top to bottom. So that means our eyes are in the middle, at the top, which is where we kind of want them to be. So if I think about making a line across this face, that's going to give me where my eyes are. Another thing is that usually across the front of our face, if we measure, we have room 5 eyeballs. So your face where the eyeballs sit is 5 eyeballs wide. So you'll see diagrams show these extra eyeballs in here for facial feature proportions. Now sometimes, of course, we're all individuals, so there's always room for variation on that. Some people's eyes are a little further apart, but for the most part, you take your fingers and freeze them here at the size of your own personal eyeball and move that space right here to the middle. It's the exact same, but true. No matter how big or small your eyes are, the space in between is equal to one of your eyes. Kooky. All right. Now if we talk about additional proportions on a face as a whole, a lot of times we want to draw a nose. So we're going to draw an L, our bad nose guy. Really, if we think of nose, is halfway between. So we could go back to the skull here. Our nose sits about halfway between. These are nasal cavities, so that's all behind your nose. But if we had it, the nose part, the finger holes bit would be down here at the bottom. If I put my pencil there, you can see that your nose is about halfway between your eyes and your chin. So we start to divide our face in half again. So this space here, I'm going to divide in half. This gives me where my nose is going to be. Your nose will be at least the space between your 2 eyes. So I just made 2 dotted lines that go straight down from the inner corner of my eye. And I'm just going to do a little nose there, okay? Just nostril. Mouth. Bad guy over here, our goofy guy. Our mouth, if we think about facing, we go halfway down between our eyes. So just do a dotted line here. And I'll talk individual features as we go. Okay, so I made my mouth. If I lift my book up, you can kind of see the mouth goes between the center of the eye. So if we down from the center of the eyeball, and again halfway between. So the bottom of my nose, the bottom of my chin, you see my mouth is halfway between. Should have done that really big so you guys could see it. Halfway between again. So we break our face into a lot of, I think about if I go over one of my extra ovals, if I divide it in half, this will be eyes. If I divide this space in half again, this is going to be my nose, and half again is going to be my mouth. So we just keep dividing the space in half and half and half to get our features in terms of like a general placement for where they belong on the face. The thing is ears. If I kind of feel or put my pencil here on my ear, you can see that the top of my ear sits kind of right here at the bottom corner of my eyebrow, and the bottom of it comes all the way down to my mouth. Ears, we tend to want to draw them very small and like this, but in reality, they're quite large. They come all the way from about where you're going to be down to about the bottom of your nose. And they don't usually stick out that much. Sometimes a little more, sometimes a little less, depending on the person. The next thing we have to talk about is hair. A lot of times people want to draw hair just up at the top. If we only had hair like that would mean that I would shave my head from the tip of both of my ears all the way across. So that would mean everything in front of my pencil, I would shave it off. We'd all look really weird if that became a stuff hair. It was strange, right? This line here where your hair starts growing along your face is called your hairline. Hairlines typically start down here in front of our ears, and they arch up and they block off part of your forehead. Sometimes people have a lower hairline and to be a shorter forehead. Some people have a very high hairline, like they have more forehead. Hairlines can be all sorts of shapes. Hairlines can go straight across and have corners. Hairlines can peak down, called a widow's peak. So this line here where your hair would start, comes down, and it's part of what gives us the illusion that our eyes are close, because our hair takes up space. That's actually, you know, skull space up there. And then the other thing is when we go to draw hair, hair has volume. It sticks up and off the skull, so that takes up space. The original oval was, and then I drew the hair up and over. Okay, so some just general proportions that are fairly common on most people's faces. We all have adjustments for, you know, bigger eyes, smaller eyes, wider nose, narrower nose, but those are some general features and their placement on a face in general. All right, now we're gonna talk specific features. We're gonna start with eyes. So, common mistake with eyes. So I'm gonna show you the bad eye, and then we're gonna talk good eye. So most of the time you guys will want to draw something that looks like a football. Pointy ends, evenly up and down on both sides. This is what we'll draw as an eye. The next thing people will do is they're gonna put the iris in there, that's the colored part, and then they're gonna wanna put the pupil in. Okay? A lot of times, then we'll want eyelashes. And ta-da, I've got an eye. Does that look anything like a real eye? No, it doesn't at all. It actually, if I extend the lashes on the other side, give it some antennas, it looks like a bug. It doesn't look like an eye at all. All right, this is what I call the space bug eye. And it is a common misconception what an eye looks like, but it makes a really great looking bug. Okay, if we think in terms of like physiology and our human structure, our anatomy, we can go back to the skull. We all share this common feature, right? We've all got one of these under our skin. And you can see here the eye socket. The eye socket, this bottom section here is what goes to your cheek. So you can find your eye socket on your face. You can feel this bone at the bottom of your eye. And you can feel where it starts to get soft and pushes into your eye itself. Your portion of your eyebrow, or your eye socket, where your eyebrow sits. So your eyebrow kind of sits just back from this outer corner. It really closely aligns with the inner corner, and it kind of arches up usually and out here on the outer corner. So you can usually feel this like bottom corner will be just under where you have hair on your eyebrow. Okay. Eye actually sits back and in this hole. It's why your eye will always have shadows above it, below it. And this is for protection. If I imagine getting hit in the face with something, I can get hit in the face with something that doesn't harm my eye. And that's because of this bone that's both under and above my eye, and that my eye sits to the back. All right? If I feel my eye is about the same size and shape as a super ball. All right? It's sitting inside this socket. I should find a super ball so I have an example of what it would look like. That'd be kind of cool. Creepy, but cool. Your eye is actually held into your head by not very much. You have an optic nerve that plugs into the back of your eye. It's holding it in your brain. You've got these two flaps of skin out here. And pretty much that's it. So that's weird to think about, but true. So if we start to think about physiology and anatomy, I can make a big circle that stands for my whole eyeball. I'm thinking now about the whole super ball of my eye. On the front of that eyeball, I'm going to draw a circle. And then inside there, I'm going to draw a circle that takes up about a third of the space. Okay? This center circle is my pupil. It's the part black. It's actually the bit that absorbs the light, and it's a hole that goes down inside my head. This is what changes in size. The iris, the colored part of your eye, is a muscle. It squeezes shut when there's too much light, pulls open when there's less light. Regular, normal daylight, you would have a third, a third, a third. Okay, so that's one of the biggest problems. People make that pupil a super tiny dot. A top pupil is a signal of bad for you if you are a human being, okay? Cannot get a tiny pupil like that very many ways. LED flashlight, 3 inches from face, your pupil will contract as tight as can go. Drug-induced coma, it's the other reason, all right? You don't want your pupil to be that small. Fully dilated or completely closed down is not great. So if I think about the skin that holds my eyelid in, it arches up and around this space. Oops, I need to have that come lower. And typically will cover the top edge of my pupil. And it's not arched up perfectly in the middle, like the middle. A human eye's highest arch is this at the front edge of your pupil, the colored part, your eye. Okay, so this is my upper eyelid. It my eye and makes this little dent or tear duct. This is the pink bit that faces your nose. My lower lid then down on this outer side of my eye. So your upper lid tends to arch up at the upper or first third. Your lower lid tends to arch down or here. So you see it's not a perfect football shape. It's kind of a funky shape. My lower lid, I can typically see a second line of skin because that eyelid is thick. Okay, so that's that inner eyelid line because that line is thick. Up here and above my eye, there will always be some sort of fold. This is the skin that allows my eye to open and shut. Eyelid line has a different shape. Okay, so it's important to look at what shape your eyelid actually has. Do you have a 1 crease eyelid or a 2 crease eyelid? That's another difference between people's eyelids. Do you have a more prominent crease or a less prominent crease? So some people don't have a particularly visible eyelid. Some people have a really prominent eyelid crease depending on how far to the front or pushed to the back your eyes sit in your skull. So this eyelid line becomes very important to look at when we're looking at a photograph because it's what will make you look like you. This bottom section, there will always be shadows and creases here too. You'll notice that these shadows and creases all line up with that original super ball that I drew because that's what gives our face its structure where those shadows come from. My eyebrow would be up here someplace, okay? So this would be my eyebrow. It's gonna sit up above my eyelid. So if we know this physical structure, we now know that we are shading around a sphere when we think about shadows. My eye itself will almost always be darker around this outer edge. So if you think about shading the eye, I'm going to have a shadow that sits under my lid that goes all the way across. I'm going to have a shadow that sits out here. Tiny bit of shadow. It's another mistake that gets made. People want to leave that white completely white because it's underneath. This guy is usually, but it tends to be shiny, so there'll be a lighter spot. And then this will be shaded. If I have blue eyes, it will be lighter, blue or green, some kind of hazel. It will be darker. Almost always be, regardless of the color of my eye, there's more concentration of pigment around this outer edge. A lot of times toward as well. And you'll notice that I skipped a little white section there. It's to make the eye look shiny and alive. Now if we move outside the eye and think in terms of shading, my eye is always going to have shadows on this outer edge. They'll lighten up because of my eyebrows at the top of that ridge, right, out at the top of the bone. This upper outer edge will have less shadow. This outer will have more shadow. So you can kind of see that my shadows go out and an original circle that I drew will be lighter again in the middle and darker again out here. And then it gets dramatically lighter fairly quickly because we go back out for the brow and out for the cheekbone. But you can see how those original shadows, how those shadows kind of line up with that original circle that I drew. It's going to be darker out here, and lighter in the center where that sphere is tallest. Now, if we think about eyelashes, for most people, eyelashes don't show very much. On the lower lid, maybe are just a little shadow like this that kind of lumps and bumps. So you can see I just sort of drew a squiggly. Is it an emergency? Go quick and come right back. On my upper lid, depending on my lashes, I'm going to see something very similar. I'm just going to see an odd shaped shadow that dangles down mostly on this outer section. So you see I just added a shadow that sits, comes out over my eye, and extends this way. For most people, this is what if you have false eyelashes on or have long eyelashes. Okay, then we'll start to see those lashes. They still curve down your eyebrow, but they start to pop up. They're irregular in length and grouping. So you can see I can start to pull some of these lashes up and out, but I won't ever see them out here on this. They'll always stay out here, mostly on this outer side. Just has to do with the curve of your eye. Very often then they will cast additional shadows out here on the surface. So if you have long eyelashes, your eyes will have more shadow. So your eye is basically a super ball or a sphere, sit-eyed, a spherical shaped hole. And that's where all the shadows come from. So we get highlight around the outer edge and shadows around the eyeball itself. There you go, eye. Next feature, nose. Your nose is one of those funny things. That is, if we think about your nose like from the side, so if I think about a human face from the side, eyes in, eyes go in and noses come out. Okay, so eyes are an in thing, so my eyes would be here, and my nose comes out of my face. This is an out thing. We oftentimes associate, and a lot of times people struggle to draw a nose because they want to draw a nose from this space right here where it starts to come out, and they want to draw all the way down the nose, okay? And then add nostrils on. Or this line like we drew on this guy, right? No one has a line on. There are no lines on my face that show where my nose is, okay? The reason we associate noses with having a line that goes down is because stick out thing. It's something that starts between eyes and goes all the way to above your nose. Always it's catching. So whatever side the light hits is light and the other side is dark, and it's this break of shadow that we associate with the line, okay? So if we think about putting some basic shapes into our nose is kind of like with a sphere at the bump, and that's for the middle part, and a second sphere on either side. All right, so if I want to think basic shapes, I have a cone and 3 spheres. Now, in terms of contour line drawing, when we go to contour line draw our portrait, really the only place to contour line draw is down here, where I affectionately call them the finger holes. Okay, nostrils. So the only place there's anything to draw on a nose is down here, where there are nostrils. Depending on the angle of your face, you either see a lot of nostril. If I tip my head back, you can see perfect circles. You tip your head down and you don't see any. All of a sudden you see something that looks like this instead. No holes, just bumps. Back you get bigger holes, down you get no holes. So this all depends on face angle. So around this example nose, what I'm drawing is just here, down here at the very bottom edge of my nose. I'm going to draw that center bridge or cleft. That's the center wall between my finger holes, nostrils. My nostrils then come out around these two spheres that I've drawn. Okay, really when we think about a nose, all of this zone here is no line and it's just shadow. So there will be a light side, dark side, and we associate those lines or those shadows with lines. But we don't want to draw anything between our eyes and our nostrils. All just shadow. Nothing to draw with a line. So the only place we line is down here, the nostrils. Or if you prefer, finger holes. All right. So when we think about shading a nose, we think in terms of the dark spots, which are going to be the darkest up close to the top of the nose, and gradually they lighten, they come out. So that area kind of gradually gets lighter. It's not a big dark circle. It's a really big mistake that gets made is you associate this whole thing with being a big dark hole, and you can see how weird that looks versus this. So the difference between big dark circle